Is Mata back in Jose's good books? Will Pirlo be leaving Juve this summer? And who's the latest Bundesliga star on Wenger's list? Joining me today are international football writer Peter Staunton and goal correspondent Greg Stobart. I'm Nat Coombs and this is Transfer Talk. Gentlemen, let's start with Juan Mata. Seems to be very much back in Jose's good books.
Yeah, he's been in and out of the side. Mourinho, of course, gave him a massive kick up the backside and he's responded. It looks like, for now at least, he's back in Mourinho's plans.
Greg, your piece about it on goal very much suggested that it was Mourinho up to his old tricks, the mind game master.
Yeah, I was starting to doubt Mourinho a bit. I thought he'd made an error of judgment with Mata, but he's a master psychologist. He knows how to get the best out of players. He wanted more all-round from Mata, and I think he's going to get it. And Mata's a brilliant professional. He'll get his head down, he'll do it, and Mourinho will come out with a more rounded player, which he's done in the past with the likes of Ronaldo and Joe Cole.
Pete, I guess no shortage of suitors for Mata if it doesn't go to Jose's plan. Who are the most likely targets that will come in for him if it doesn't play out?
Well, so long as he remains in and around the Chelsea team, he won't be going anywhere, that's for sure, because he is probably their most creative player. But if push came to shove, then Rafa Benitez at Napoli would certainly take a look at him. He would complement Mark Hamsik very, very nicely in that attacking midfield position. And also Atletico Madrid, as well as they're going in the Spanish Liga, Diego Simeone would also find a place, I think, for Juan Mata.
The one thing I'd say about that is there are teams in the Premier League who would be interested. Man United and Tottenham both made inquiries over the summer. Chelsea wouldn't sell him to a rival, which is why his father was hawking him around a little bit to Spanish clubs in the last couple of weeks. OK, we'll move on to Serie A, and the contract talks between Juve and Pirlo are on hold. That's the official line on that. What do you make of it, Pete? Well,
Pirlo's no spring chicken. He's 34, he's going to be 35 by the time this contract runs out. He's earning around €4 million a season, which, you know, given his talent, it seems like a fair sum, but given his age, I mean, Juventus could probably spend that money a little bit more wisely, is probably what the club are thinking at this stage.
He says he's happy to sign a deal as long as he feels wanted. Do you think he is still wanted at Juve, long term?
I'm not sure. They've already got Paul Pogba there. He's almost a natural replacement, a more dynamic replacement as well. And of course, Juve are in a very similar situation to what AC Milan found themselves in a couple of years ago. They made the decision then to let Pirlo leave, and it was the wrong decision.
Could you see Pirlo leaving Italy and moving abroad?
Well, once upon a time, we couldn't see Pirlo leaving Milan, and he went to their direct rivals Juventus, and he's ended up winning 2 Serie A titles, taking them back into the Champions League. So for Pirlo, I think anything at this stage is possible. Gianluigi Buffon came out this week and said it would be a total disaster if Juventus got rid of Pirlo, and they may as well dismantle the stadium brick by brick and sell every player at the club. Now, I don't know if I would be that dramatic about his departure, because all good things must come to an end. And maybe at the end of this contract, Juventus might see it as a good time for a natural break between themselves and Pirlo.
All right, then that's what the guys think. What about you? #AskGoal. Should Pirlo stay or go at Juve? Right, we're going to move things on to the Bundesliga, gentlemen. Another target for Arsene Wenger. Seems very keen to go over there, plunder some players and bring them back to the Emirates. The latest, not necessarily a news story, but possible developments there in terms of Lars Bender. Tell us more.
Yeah, Arsene Wenger's very keen on the German market. He's been looking at Bender for a while. They had a look in January. They made an inquiry again in the summer. But now with Arsenal, of course, they've got Flamini in, so it's not quite the priority it might have been.
Other potential Premier League targets would be?
For me, I think Man United would make a lot more sense than Arsenal at this stage, because they're at least 2 or 3 midfielders short.
And could you see a deal getting done in January, or are we waiting until next summer?
I don't think he's the kind of player that David Moyes would go for. So far we've seen he goes with the players he knows. Marouane Fellaini, they'll go for Leighton Baines again. I just don't think he's a Moyes kind of player.
Not the kind of player that Moyes would go for. What kind of player is he in your estimation, Pete?
For me, Lars Bender, he's Leverkusen's most important player, and even including Stefan Kiesling in that. He's very, very dynamic in the midfield area, probably a more intelligent player than his brother, who plays for Borussia Dortmund, who's much more of a hatchet man, if you like. Bender is a very, very versatile player. We've seen him play at right back even for Germany, and he just seems to have fantastic football IQ, wonderful ability, great engine, good stamina, and a very good passer of the ball. But Rudi Völler came out this week and said there's been no offer so far, and they've no intention of selling.
And do you anticipate this being a little bit of a trend now for Wenger to look at German players, or at least players that would develop within the Bundesliga, even if they've moved on?
Well, once upon a time, of course, it was the French market he was looking at, but for a reason now he's looking into the German market, and you know, it kind of ticks all the boxes for Wenger. Over the last 10, 12 years, they've gone big on youth development, and he's got German players of various stages of their development. He's got senior internationals like Podolski and Mertesacker. He's got younger players then like Özil and Gnabry. And, you know, Bender really would fit that paradigm at Arsenal at the minute.
Okay, guys, market leaders. This is where we've ranked our top 10 summer signings. You can see them on the screen right now. Isco, still very much top of the pile. Fair call?
Fair call for me. He did have a wobble, obviously, in the weekend defeat to Atletico. It wasn't his type of game. But over the course of the season, I'm sure that Isco is going to prove the best value, the best player, best summer signing.
High praise indeed. Do you agree with it, Greg?
Yeah, he's been brilliant and more than justified the decision to sell Ozil to Arsenal.
Okay, well, there is always room to get into the top 10 players bubbling under. Put your case forward, Pete.
This week, I'm going to go for an outside contender. It's Gervinho, who moved from Arsenal to Roma. He looks a player reborn under Rudi Garcia, scored twice in a 5-0 demolition at Bologna at the weekend, has made Francesco Totti look 10 years younger. Altogether looks like the same type of player that was playing at Lille for Garcia, not the busted flush that played for Arsenal.
Busted flush. For that phrase alone, you're in serious contention. Greg, how about you? Which player do you think isn't in the top 10 that possibly should be?
For me, it's got to be Christian Eriksen. 11.6 million, one of Tottenham's cheapest summer signings, but for me, he could be the difference between them finishing 5th or 6th and in the top 3. They desperately needed that number 10, the playmaker, to pull the strings, and he's doing it. He's providing goals, creating assists, he's linking up the play for the other new signings. He's been awesome, and he's been every bit as good as Ozil so far. They're
both strong suggestions. I do feel the transition and the different kind of player we're seeing in Gervinho is remarkable based on what we saw at Arsenal, but I agree with Greg this time around. Eriksen has been sensational at Spurs so far, given the high profile of all the other signings that came into White Hart Lane in the summer. Fair play. He goes into the top 10. I'm going to bring Quintero out. He hasn't done anything wrong, particularly just hasn't set the world alight. So he goes out of the top 10 and Eriksen goes in. Before we move on, Mike Neal, one of our viewers, puts forward the case for Aubameyang. What do you think of that?
Aubameyang, yeah, he's been good, maybe a bit inconsistent in his finishing, and I think what we're seeing is quite a streaky striker in the sense that, you know, he scores heavily in one game, doesn't score for a few matches. I think he's only scored in 2 matches for Dortmund so far across the league campaign. And in order to dislodge Lewandowski as the #1 forward, and in order to gain the trust, I think, wholeheartedly of Klopp, he's going to need to start scoring a little bit more regularly.
So, gents, we're now an added time where we put some of our viewers' questions to you, and hopefully you answer them. Pedro Nunes via Twitter says, how come when a Dortmund star leaves Germany, and he name-checks Kagawa and Shahin, it doesn't seem to work out?
That's a brilliant question. There could be all sorts of reasons for it. But I think first and foremost, we need to take each player on their own merits. Now, Shahin was the fulcrum of the Dortmund system. When he moved to Real Madrid, he didn't have that same care and attention that he had at the Westfalenstadion. So he's always going to struggle for identity in that team. Kagawa, I think, is a square peg in a round hole for Manchester United. Quite simply, the system doesn't really fit him. Now, he plays wide for Japan, yeah, we know that. But he did his best work at Dortmund when he was playing centrally, in behind either Barrios or Lewandowski. He hasn't had that opportunity to shine yet for Manchester United, nor has he had the opportunity to be the counter-attacking force that he was in Germany.
So, Greg, Bradley Phillips suggests there might be other players leaving Dortmund. Gundogan, terrific player, linked with a number of different clubs, Man United in particular, and they need a player like him, don't they?
He's a wonderful player who'd suit any Premier League team, not least Man United. He's got all the attributes they'd be looking for. But again, I don't think he's the kind of player that David Moyes specifically is going to look for. The team that are looking at Gundogan, again, we mentioned it earlier, Arsene Wenger looking at the German market. They've been looking very hard. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move next summer. Okay, interesting stuff. All right, Pete, when I say numerous users, I'm talking many, 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 reacted quite strongly to your suggestion in last week's show that Isco is 100 times better than Özil. So defend yourself, my friend.
I don't need to defend myself to anybody, Nat. All I'm saying is that if I was the manager of Real Madrid and I had the choice across 2 seasons, say 100 matches between Isco and Özil, I'd pick Isco every time. 100 times, though, is a rather extreme distinction. Maybe I took a little liberty in saying that, but there's no doubt about it in my mind who's the superior player. It's Isco. Greg, defend your friend. Pete or the other guy? Thanks very much indeed, gents. That's it for today, I'm afraid. If you have a question for the guys, or indeed you have a player that you think should be in our top 10 in the market leaders section, don't forget to use the hashtag AskGoal. For more on the stories you heard on today's show, head on over to Goal.